Businesses thrive by knowing customer insights because today's insights are tomorrow's facts. At iResearch, we live and breathe insights. And despite searching high and low, we were unable to find a customer insights podcast that answers one of the most important questions in business. Why do customers do what they do? So we launched one. Hi, I'm your host, Darshan Mehta. In this episode, I'm going to be speaking with Millie Tadewaldt. She is the founder and CEO of Brilliant, a company specializing in personalized corporate gifting. Before founding Brilliant in 2015, Millie worked in various roles across different industries, including business development, product management, and operations. She has worked at AngelList, co-founded Cake Style, and served as managing director at Sandbox Industries. The idea for Brilliant likely stemmed from a desire to revolutionize the corporate gifting experience by offering personalized and high-quality gifts to clients, leading to the establishment of a successful concierge corporate gifting and branded merchandising company. She's also a lawyer, holds a law degree from Harvard Law School and a Bachelor of Science degree in design from the University of California at Davis. Welcome, Millie. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Darshan. What a great intro.
So tell me about your journey and the aha moments that have brought you to where you are now.
Yeah, great question. So I guess the first thing I wanted to say is when you gave the intro, you mentioned my theoretical goal to revolutionize corporate gifting. And for me, that's not always how my brain works. My brain usually works at a lower level than that. So I came into the branded merch and corporate gifting and event space via just personal experience and largely via the experience of having kind of a bad time ordering what should be fun, happy stuff. So back in 2010, when I was a managing director at Sandbox Industries, I wanted to buy some jackets for the team. I had received as an intern a few years prior to that a fleece jacket from Bain and Company, which I was so proud to receive as an intern because I thought so highly of the company I was interning at. And at the end of the summer, all the interns got a fleece, and that was a prized possession of mine. And when I went on to Sandbox a few years later and took a leadership role there, I was running a team of about 40, and I thought it would be pretty cool to replicate that same experience and create a Sandbox jacket that would give people pride and loyalty and positive feelings. So I embarked on my first swag order. And the way I did that was, it was still the time of the internet, but you would Google, swag or branded merch, and the stuff that would come up would be not that inspiring. And I mentioned around the office that I was looking for some swag, and the office manager suggested I call our swag guy. So I picked up the phone, and this is, 2010, like we were doing the internet at that point. We had iPhones, but I picked up the phone, called this guy, and he said, "Okay, great, let's make an appointment." I said, "An appointment? Okay." So we make an appointment. It's like 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, and he comes with his rolling suitcase of samples, jacket samples for me to look at, which I guess is cool on some levels, but on some other levels, like making an appointment felt bad. He only had one size of the jacket, and it was like a men's large, and I'm not a men's large. And so I ultimately ordered the jackets. He wouldn't let me keep any of the samples for people to try on. So it ended up feeling like taking a bit of a flyer. And it was kind of an expensive investment, at least to my budget at the time, to buy jackets for the whole team. And that experience led me to feel some concern about the state of ordering branded merch. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how some of the principles of modern e-commerce that we were exploring at Sandbox at the time, we were starting e-com companies in the Sandbox incubator. I was realizing that some of those principles of e-commerce, and specifically around like reducing decision fatigue and increasing confidence in a purchase, those things could have really served him and that buying experience well. So I had that stuck in the back of my brain for a few years. And a few years later, when I was working at AngelList, so I had the opportunity to give gifts to partners of AngelList in the context of our business relationship. And I was extremely delighted to see what a positive impact a good gift can have. And I'd seen the same thing receiving that fleece of my own in 2007 and giving those fleeces in 2010. All of that was the right positive emotional moment for everybody. And so it sort of further contributed to my confidence that this was a worthy subject to try to come in and improve. And so I guess I would say I never came here trying to revolutionize anything, but I did come trying to improve something that I thought was worthy of improvement. And that's how I found myself in the world of corporate gifting and branded merch, which is a big and interesting space. I was surprised to find when I got here.
Well, sometimes I agree. I don't think many people say, I'm going to go out and revolutionize, but they're looking for a better way to do it. And that's often the beginning of potentially a revolution, anyways. But let's take a step a little bit further back. You start off on the path to become a lawyer. And I guess what led you to want to be a lawyer? And then how did that change? Because this is quite a departure from that as well.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll start even further back. I started on a few different paths and explored things and picked up a lot along the way on each of those paths, but ultimately didn't do any of them particularly. So I started, I guess I would say, my career as a teenager. I grew up in a small town in very far northern California, like the boonies, three stoplights kind of thing. And as a teenager, in my boredom, I randomly taught myself how to code. I guess just nerdy tendencies cannot be suppressed. So learned how to code as a teenager, which was a lens that shaped everything I did after that, and still does. I look at things like a software engineer, and I try to solve problems in that way, I think. And I also really like to apply technology to every problem and see if I can improve things with technology. So I started off that way. I went to college and majored in design. Had sort of fully planned to move into the advertising industry and become some kind of cool advertising designer. I didn't really have a plan, but I knew I liked visuals and I knew I liked how powerful the right visual can make things. And so when I graduated from college, I looked for a job at an ad agency, and I struggled for probably 9 months to find something. And when I finally got an offer, it was the salary was so low, I couldn't have afforded to move to San Francisco and make that work. But while I was looking for a job, I had taken my software engineering skills and my design skills and started a software engineering company that created custom web apps for small businesses in the area I was living in. And so I sort of inadvertently stumbled into creating my own proprietary content management system, a CMS, and helped custom build that for all of my various clients at the time. And one of those clients had their website plagiarized. They took the whole website and they took the company name out and they took the owner's name out and they took the geography out and they replaced it with their business. It was a wedding florist. And I went into the plagiarized site and I looked at the source code. I don't know if you saw the recent Shopify lawsuit. They sued Shopline for stealing their top theme. And they looked at the source code, and in the source code, there were little remnants, little breadcrumbs of the original source code. And I could see that just like Shopify and Shopline, that this wedding florist web designer, I'm sure it wasn't the florist themselves, had fully ripped off my poor client's site. And that was my first encounter with IP law, because at that point I started researching, well, what can I do about this? I was kind of offended. It had been my blood, sweat, and tears, and it was a beautiful website, and now somebody had ripped it off, and my client was pretty offended too. So we registered for a copyright. I mean, I don't even think we ever ultimately did anything, but that started to get me interested in the law, and it made me realize the sort of process of going through that made me realize how the law probably hadn't caught up with where tech was in 2003. So that led me down the path of thinking about law school, and got into Harvard. So I figured I should probably go. And I wasn't totally sure I wanted to be a lawyer, but I was interested in law and business and technology, and I could tell there was some interesting stuff going on at that intersection. And I thought that would be a pretty good adventure. So I packed up and drove from Davis, California to Cambridge, and got to see a whole new world for the first time. I had grown up in this small town and never known anyone who'd gone to an Ivy League school, and had never even imagined I'd go to grad school. Not in like a self-deprecating way. I just didn't really have that ambition. But when you get into Harvard, you go. So I did, and it was a great choice. But when I got there, I realized pretty quickly that a lawyer's role is that of an agent, not a principal. And you would always just be just as unfair. There's many super powerful, amazing lawyers, some of whom I know from law school out in the world, but it'd be a very long time before I'd be calling any of the shots myself, and I'd be someone's advisor for a very long time, if not forever, if I took a path as a powerful lawyer. And so I realized I probably wanted to alter that path a little bit. And that's what led me to management consulting, which was kind of a well-trodden alternative to going to a big law firm out of law school. You could take this sort of little hook to the right and go be a management consultant and be treated sort of like you got an MBA in addition to your JD. So that's what I did. And that was also kind of a great thing to add to my set of experiences. But I knew this going into it. Management consultants are also agents, of course, because they're not in charge of the ultimate decision. They just get to come in and make a proposal and give some advice. And as a 24-year-old, 25-year-old fresh out of law school, these big companies rightfully didn't really care what I had to say. So it was fun for me to come in and academically study, like, how can we save money for these two big candy companies that have merged? Or how can we help this global milk solids giant improve their sales processes? Those are some of the projects I worked on. But ultimately, it felt like I was too far away from the details to really, truly contribute, at least at the stage I was in my career. And I wanted to get my hands dirtier, and again, kind of wanted to find myself on the hook a little bit for the decisions I was making.
But you've always had, I think, an inclination towards technology, as you said as well, right?
Yeah, and that was a lens that I used a lot as a management consultant. I had skills that enabled me to write custom software to process data and scrape data and do all kinds of things with the client data that we had, or even create new data that I used as a management consultant in our projects. And that was my little party trick, but also kind of handy to be able to use that lens. So I definitely knew I was drawn towards the tech world coming out of that. And I had this incredible opportunity. I met one of the CEOs of Sandbox Industries, and they had started a web incubator, meaning they were starting baby companies. And for some reason, Nick Rosa was the guy, still is. Nick saw in me that I would be able to lead that, which I was, and it was great. I don't know how he could see that. That feels like one of those lucky magic moments when someone sees you and gives you a shot at something that you can do, but you sort of don't totally deserve. And that was a huge career moment for me to get to come in and run this incubator. I got there and looked around and realized we don't have any software engineers on staff. So one of the first orders of business when I joined Sandbox was to figure out how to recruit some software engineers, which it was Chicago, and it was 2010, 2011. And these were the days of Groupon and Braintree and a number of cool Chicago companies blowing up. So recruiting the first engineer was kind of a challenge, because engineers don't typically want to work at companies that don't have other engineers at them. But we made it work, and we started a few different companies in the e-commerce space. And that was such a delightful educational part of my career, getting to see all that and try those things and really get my hands dirty, and kind of trial by fire, learning how to manage people, learning how to build an org. I'd never done any of those things, but they gave me a chance to try it, and that was pretty special. One of my ahas in my career has been to always take a job that's a little bit out of reach. Meaning, if you can get a job that asks you to do more than you've ever done before, and get in a little bit over your skis, you should do it, because that's the place where the fastest growth happens and where you learn the most and where you also have the biggest chance for professional growth. And I've done that throughout my entire career. That's not to say like oversell yourself or be dishonest. I never was, but I certainly bit off a little bit more than I could chew basically every single time I had a chance to pick my next move. And I would highly recommend that for anybody who dares.
So then what was the spark that led to starting Brilliant?
Yeah, so after Sandbox, I went to AngelList in San Francisco, which is or at the time was about 20 people, almost all of whom were software engineers, like full on, full time computer science degree or computer science dropout kind of thing. And that was a very different experience from being sort of the only kind of, I mean, I can code, but I'm no like formally educated, in the know software engineer. And so that was incredible to get to see how such an engineering heavy org runs and what that's like. And my role at AngelList was to I joined the day that syndicates launched. So I don't know if you know AngelList, but one of its big products is this line of business called syndicates, which pairs angel investors with startups and helps them raise syndicated rounds, and allows other accredited investors to participate in those rounds, sort of like a little mini one-off venture fund. So the syndicate lead who found the deal gets carry, and AngelList gets a little bit of carry, and all these other investors get a chance to invest in a company they probably wouldn't have been able to get on the cap table of. So my job was to help get those deals done. So I would work with the syndicate leads and I'd talk to a lot of startups and I'd try to make matches and try to get those deals all the way through to close, including, looking at legal docs and working with the lawyers. There was, certain documents they had to agree to be part of the syndicate. And so negotiating some of those. And that was a really cool experience to see all of that. But one thing kept striking me was that there were a lot of really smart people out there pitching business ideas and starting companies where my practical business brain just couldn't understand how that would ever be like a real business. And I know this is not like a light bulb for everyone in the venture capital space. Like the odds of an individual investment being a unicorn are obviously really low. But for me as a, late 20s, early 30s person thinking about what I was going to do with my career, it struck me that I really didn't want to have a low probability chance of success on my next shot. I wanted to hit a single or a double and get something good under my belt that I had done. And not that, shooting for the moon and going to zero isn't really good. It just wasn't the type of good I was after. And so I knew what I wanted to do next was start a company that I could bootstrap and have be profitable from the beginning and never require outside funding. So that was just one of the parameters I identified as what was important to me in my next move. Kind of through a lot through seeing these other founders, smart, awesome people, doing something different and realizing that kind of wasn't for me. So a big part of starting Brilliant was wanting to orient around an idea where I could see a path to profitability really quickly and where I could take on a lot of the cost burden upfront with my own labor. So when I started Brilliant, I used my, bad experiences buying merch and swag and good experiences giving gifts and those positive emotions and kind of mix it together with my desire to start a profitable company. And this seemed like a company I could start all by myself. So I, started to experiment and wrote a website up and, designed a brand and started reaching out to people in my network to see if they'd let me come talk to them about my idea. And then I also started sending cold emails to people in the Bay Area who seemed like they might be potential buyers of this type of thing and asking for meetings and seeing if my positioning resonated. And it seemed like it did. And that was really exciting because I know when a lot of entrepreneurs start a company, it can take a long time to achieve product market fit. And I knew that innately because when I'd been at Sandbox, we were starting all kinds of companies. And when we'd have, 10 ideas at a time, and we had this toolbox of how do you test if an idea's got traction. And there were a few different common tools in the toolbox. And one of them was buying display ads on Google or Facebook. One of them was cold emailing. So I was using one of my old tools in the toolbox, and the response rate to these cold emails was absolutely incredible. Like, I was getting CMOs calling my phone number in the signature off of a cold email. And this was 2015. So I guess the sort of era of everyone getting all up in your inbox hadn't yet fully begun. So I was getting important decision makers' attention with my framing of what was almost entirely just an idea. I was, hey, we're brilliant. Here's what we do. And there is no we, it's me. And what we do is really my vision for what we do. And, trying to use phrasing that would encourage them to feel like they could trust us without being dishonest, and trying to get that interest. And indeed, the sort of, I guess I wouldn't call it product market fit because we didn't really even have a product yet, but we had an idea. So maybe it's idea market fit. And that was the response rate there was just so incredible that I knew I was onto something. And from there, got a couple big orders. I think I did $50,000 in revenue my second month in business. And sort of coming into it, there'd been a question of risk, right? What is the risk of this? Because I think a lot of people, when they think about starting a company, they talk about the risk the entrepreneur takes. And I was lucky. My husband had started a company 2 years prior, and he had taken the risk then. And I had been the one with the steady salary. Now it sort of felt like my turn. And we looked around and we could see my husband's income was enough to pay the bills. And my income at AngelList was good, but it wasn't so good that I worried I couldn't go get another one like it at another job if it didn't work out. So, the risk I was looking at was the loss of my income for however many months it took me to decide whether this idea had legs. And very quickly, I built up enough business that there was no lost income. And so I think that framing of the risk, and of course, like having a partner who makes an income and enables you to go off and make nothing, was a privilege in a lot of ways. And I'd sort of done the time for Ben when he was starting his company, and I'd been the one with the income. But yeah, I think that's a lucky privilege to be able to just go make no money for a time. And I also had a baby at that point. I had my first kid in early 2015. And so, there was pressure to commute into San Francisco for my salary. And now all of a sudden there was no pressure. I was saving 2 hours a day commuting and got to see my kid at home more often. We had a nanny. And so I got to see Max, and it checked a lot of boxes at that point in my life. And the risk was small because I knew at any point I could go back and get another corporate job somewhere. And if I didn't try this, when would I ever? That equation, I think, is important for people to consider. And I think there's all kinds of worlds where I could have even done that without a partner. Probably couldn't have done it with a baby and no partner. But yeah.
But it seems like talking to you, you've always been, I'm not sure if this is that's something that you intuitively did or you learned, but you seem to be very customer-centric focused. And also, with your technology background, you're able to then combine the two. And it sounds like you can not only talk technical, but you can also talk non-technical, which is also an advantage. So what made you customer-centric and focused?
I think from a very young age, I always noticed good customer service and bad customer service. And I think it's similar to when you notice having a good manager and a bad manager. I think you almost learn more from the bad experiences than the good ones. And I spent a lot of time thinking about those bad experiences, not so much in like a Karen kind of way, but in a, how would I have done that differently? And what would have felt good here? And I just really internalized a lot of that empathy around what the customer might be feeling. I also really have a strong, passionate dislike of bureaucracy. And I feel like a lot of times customer service goes off the rails. It's because it's rarely because the person you're talking to is not a nice person or isn't genuine. It's because the company hasn't given them the tools to be reasonable. And so I've avoided bureaucracy as much as possible everywhere I go, and especially at Brilliant. And I think this gets tricky because people like certainty, employees like certainty. People struggle with ambiguity, and bureaucracy is a really good answer to those needs for certainty and lack of ambiguity because it gives rules and structure. But what happens with rules and structure is a lot of times the rules and structure just don't make any sense. It's hard for me to ask someone to uphold a policy just because it exists, and even in cases where it doesn't make sense. And so I think that's been an interesting balance that we've tried to juggle at Brilliant around giving people the right amount of structure, make it so they don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, and make it so the answer is knowable, but giving them the right amount of flexibility that they can deliver genuine customer service and get to the right answer. And that's been, I think, an interesting kind of brain teaser to navigate as this company has gotten bigger, trying to continue to keep that spirit alive when people often are sort of just looking for the answer. But the reality is there isn't always an answer. And sometimes the answer is use common sense. And how do you, I don't know how you formalize common sense, and maybe you don't, but that's been a thing we've thought a lot about.
That's a good question. How do you formalize common sense? Then the question is also, what is common sense, right? But I think a lot of it goes back to something we often talk about on this podcast is insights. And so I'm curious, how would you define an insight?
So I guess I think an insight might be seeing a glimmer of truth in in a way that has more clarity than previously known, if that makes sense.
I agree. And I think an insight is actually trying to get at a core truth, right? And I often talk about an example of an insight is seeing a really good comedian that takes something from here and over here, puts it together, and it makes you say, "Oh my God, I never thought of it that way," but that's so true, right? And that is an insight. And that also, I think, is also common sense. Sometimes its simplicity is not that obvious to you, but you can get to that common sense. And that often is the best solution for most things is to do it what is common sense. And I think that's similar to programming, right? I mean, programming is very logical, and the more complex you make it, then you can just really kind of overcomplicate things. But if you just keep it simple and address things one at a time.
Yeah, yeah. It's so easy to get your head down in the weeds and be focused on the intricate details of something that you thought was important and kind of lose sight of the bigger picture. And in coding, I think one example that always stands out to me is you'll be, 4 hours deep on a problem and you can't untangle it. And for me, I go for a run or a walk or a shower or go to bed. And in the morning, it's just like crystal clear. And you just took that one step of abstraction back and you thought about it. And I think that example is actually a little easier to for me to wrap my head around than the one that's about people, which I think is what we're talking about when we talk about common sense and empowering employees to use good customer service, because people are more complicated than code. That I guess that's why engineers are considered, the stereotype is nerdy and antisocial because code's so simple. It's ones and zeros. Like how wrong can it go? But people, it's not just ones and zeros, right? It's a lot of nuances, and it's not predictable, and they're always a surprise. So I think using common sense with people can sometimes be even trickier. You don't really realize what you're stepping into.
It can be a challenge, but as complex as human nature is, there are certain things that are pretty true and consistent with human nature as well, right? And I think when we talk about common sense, it's not just necessarily observing facts, figures, things like that. It's actually, I think, decision making, right? Actually making a decision that doesn't need to be overcomplicated. And I've often found one of the best ways to do that is when you have a complex task, is just break it up into bite-sized pieces, you know, and then it just makes it much easier, and then you can put it all together later on. But that's just part of the challenge, and I think that's sometimes common sense can surface a little bit more when you try to simplify it.
And that's at the core of our sort of concierge model too, I think, is the principle of, well, so we have that. Have you ever heard that story about be like the duck, smooth and calm and gliding along on the surface and paddling like hell underneath? We've got that duck on the first page of our training manual. And the idea is our clients don't want to see the details, right? They want to be part of the good decisions and they want to make those, and all the rest of it, spare them. Like, it is not good customer service to give someone the play by play. If a package gets delayed and we can fix it, just don't even tell them. We're trying to eliminate decision fatigue by giving them, 3 good options, pick one, instead of 1,000 options, a lot of which are bad. Like, we're trying to, like, that's the whole point of being a concierge, is making it easy for someone to make just the right, delightful decisions and leaving the rest kind of hidden from view. Because good customer service to me is not knowing all the guts and gore that goes into it. It's just seeing the beautiful finished product and being a hero at work, making those magical moments.
So when you started Brilliant, I'm curious, what three opportunities did you see existed to make Brilliant different than other, swag companies?
Yeah. So reducing that decision fatigue has always been core to the concept of Brilliant. Let's say you decide you want to get a Getting to Aha pen, and let's say your brand colors are hot pink and lime green, which would be kind of fun, crazy. Um, so let's say you go out and you're looking for a hot pink pen. If you go on, one of, I don't know, back in the old days, you would get a catalog from a swag vendor and there'd be pages and pages of pens. But you know what you want. You want a hot pink pen and you want to spend about $3 and you want it to write really smooth. You want it to be like gel ink. I think the sort of empathetic customer service view of that problem, and I thought this at the time too, is I only want to see 3 options. I want to see 3 hot pink pens that meet my criteria, and I want to pick the one that makes my heart sing. I don't want to sort through 1,000 pens and wonder. I want someone to tell me what the 3 best choices are, and I'll pick one. So that reduced decision fatigue concept was a huge thing coming into it. And I think part of what goes along with that is great design. So when we present products to our clients at Brilliant for their review, they're always beautiful. We have a team of designers who is hand logoing every product to our clients' brand standards. So everything we pitch you, you can bring back to your team and look really good by showing how gorgeous all these products are going to look and really help people understand what the finished product is going to look like. So reduced decision fatigue, great design, technology. So not having that requirement to make an appointment in person for someone to come out with their rolling suitcase of samples. That felt very unmodern to me. And when I thought about who was buying this type of stuff, and as I started to explore the space, I realized it was people that were actually a lot like me at the time. It was often women, given the roles of who buys swag. It's marketing managers, it's people on the HR team, it's people in brand, and they're men too. But I think a disproportionate amount of females are in those roles, and they at least at the time were mid-20s to mid-30s. So these are people, especially women, who are aces at online shopping. They know all the best e-commerce experiences. They are connoisseurs of the shopping cart. As a stereotype, of course, everyone's different. But that audience to me felt severely underserved by this make an appointment and have a guy come with a rolling suitcase model. That felt like very divorced of the type of buying experience they wanted. So there's that technology layer there. And then there's this other thing I realized, which is swag is an acronym for stuff we all get or shit we all get, depending on if this podcast leaps. Companies don't really like talking or thinking about swag. And I thought a lot about why, and I still think a lot about why, because when done right, it is delightful. I still think back to that Bain fleece I got in 2007 that just delighted me to no end and made me feel like privileged to be a part of the team. Like, that's amazing. Why wouldn't you want to spend $50 and make an employee feel like that? But people don't like to talk and think about swag. I have a client who's an SVP of a major tech company in the US who is always complaining about, why are we talking about this? I realized we had to figure out how to make it not be the stepchild. And a big part of how to do that, I think, is to help our clients and give them the tools and the technology and the data to measure the ROI. And sometimes it's easier to do it directly, like gifting in the go-to-market funnel. if you're sending gifts to prospects at a certain stage in the funnel and you realize sending a gift here is going to lead to a 50% increase in a prospect's willingness to take a demo call, now you can wrap your arms around the value of gifting in the go-to-market funnel, because you should know the value of a demo call, because if someone takes a demo, they're 50% likely to sign up, and the lifetime value of a customer is $100,000. So the value of a demo call, and therefore you can know what the value of lifting that conversion rate into the demo call would be. So that's kind of the simplest version of ROI in gifting. But there's other versions. Some can be around employee happiness or retention or feelings of belonging or culture. Because with gifting, it's interesting to try to blend the idea of measuring emotions. Emotions are something people don't try to measure typically. But if you're going to do it at work and you're going to spend a lot of money on it, you should probably figure out how to measure it. And gifts, the whole point of gifts is to create an emotion. And so that the idea of trying to measure that is just so foreign to people, yet it is so necessary for gifting programs to be successful at scale. And that's what we've always aimed to do. And we realized a long time ago that's better for our business. The bigger scale we get and the more serious our clients are about seeing the value of that, the more willing they are going to be to invest in a great gifting program and a great gifting partner.
So how do you measure the emotion?
That example I gave around the funnel is sort of the simplest. A fantasy around how you might measure ROI of gifting to employees would be to split test, right? You could give half your employees an anniversary gift and not give the other half an anniversary gift. You could never do that. So you have to get a little bit more indirect. So what we have built at Brilliant to help enable that is a product called Thank You Notes. After a big gift campaign goes out, or even as a gift campaign goes out on an ongoing basis, the gift recipients receive from us an email asking how it was and what they thought, and if they want to share some feedback. And we're able to share all that feedback with our clients on a real-time dashboard that basically shows positive sentiment and actual employee comments on gifting. And that ends up being a nice way to begin to bolster that conversation. But I would add, I think all of this is also a huge project around educating our client. I can't tell you how many clients I've had who are talking about funnel gifting, and they want to talk about measuring success, and they want to talk about the ROI of gifting in the funnel, which is the easiest, nicest place to do it. And they don't know the value of a demo call, and they don't know the conversion rate from demo to paying client, and they don't know the lifetime value of a customer. And our hands are largely tied when we get into that, because I guess we can tell you the lift to a demo call, but we can't tell you all the rest of that. We can't tell you the true ROI if you don't know yourself. And so we take that upon ourselves to begin to educate our clients about how to think about that stuff and how to put the right foundations in place to begin measuring the value of each stage in the funnel and think about, lifetime value of a customer.
I think this is where your consulting background came into play here for sure.
100%. Yep, exactly. And still it's now like we're running 4 different businesses under one umbrella, because there's, the concierge gifting service, there's technology platform. We also run our own warehousing for a variety of reasons. And then there's this kind of consulting piece.
So you mentioned a couple of times, give people 3 options. So I think you're aware of the power of 3 that exists out there, correct?
Yes, I think we all are a little bit aware of it.
Yeah, but it's actually a proven concept. Yeah, that humans like choice, and 2's not enough, but 3's enough, and then 4's too much. And after a while, it can be paralyzing, right? If you have too many options. I mean, look, when you meet a genie, how many wishes does the genie give you, right?
Something magical about that number.
Yeah, but it's true. And in fact, I was working on a programming project, and one of my engineers came back and said, "Hey, you can sort the data 12 different ways." And I said, "Okay, why?" And he said, "Because I can." I said, "This is way too many options. Give me the 3 best options, because that's what people want. It's just enough to have 3."
Yep. I think we all feel that in our hearts, but it's nice when that stuff gets studied. And then you get into all these fun things. I don't know if you've heard that story about like, why is there the $110 bottle of whiskey at the grocery store right next to the $30 bottle? Well, it's to make the $30 bottle feel affordable. They call that a tone setter. And so sometimes we'll give a fourth option that's like a tone setter. But we give more than three options too. It's just the idea around kind of trying to make someone's life nicer.
When you start getting to 5, 6, I mean, there is there's a diminishing return there at some point for sure. And 3 is ideal. Yeah. What's next for you? What do you see yourself in the future for things that might interest you, or where you think you're going to be taking Brilliant? Well, what are your thoughts to what do you see happening with gifting? Is AI going to play a role in any of this?
Brilliant's going to take over the world. That's the plan. We spent a long time laying the foundation to make sure that we can continue to deliver all that we believe in at a greater scale. So we are marching towards 100 million in revenue, and that's the sort of next stop for us. And along the way, we're going to continue to augment all that we offer to continue to deliver the best for our clients who are gloriously picky. I love that about them. And they want the best, and they hold us to high standards, and they push us to develop all the right things. And some of them push us to develop the wrong things too, and we have to figure out how to redirect that, and how to say no, and how to navigate the right things. So we're going to keep building and growing. And a big part of what we want to do also is helping our team have a lot of leverage at work. So we have a lot of creative partners who work directly with our clients. And that's one of the core roles here at Brilliant, is the creative partner who's the boots on the ground, actually executing the client projects. And the entire org spends a ton of time thinking about these people and trying to make their jobs nicer and make them happier and give them opportunities for career growth. And so we are building tools, including using AI, to help those fine people enjoy their jobs more and be more efficient and more effective, and also building out more processes, enhancing their toolkits, basically, to make sure that they're able to do their jobs and focus on the things that use their great brains instead of things that feel like paperwork and feel like kind of manual labor on the computer, if you will. So a lot of what we do is oriented around making the creative partners' lives better, which we know will pass along to the clients, because the happier those people are and the more they want to stick with us and keep doing great at work, the more great work they'll do for our clients.
Sure. I'm sure a lot of it's not just swagging, it's actually delivering an experience, right? And that's what you're actually ultimately delivering. It's not just products, you're actually delivering an experience. And I would think AI might be kind of an interesting way to incorporate some more creativity in some of that as well, and trying some different things.
It's certainly very creative. Some of the images you see generated from AI, you're like, wow, it's maybe a little too creative, but fun to play with it.
It all depends on the instructions you give it, right?
That's right. We're still working on our prompts over here.
Exactly. So if you could have lunch or dinner with anybody in your industry, who would it be and why?
Maybe the CEO of Patagonia, who discontinued the program around allowing branding on Patagonia garments. Their reasoning, I thought, was smart, which was, branded goods often end up in the landfill, and Patagonia is a very eco-conscious company. But I'd like to have a quick debate about whether maybe thoughtful branding might actually make a garment more meaningful to somebody. And maybe there is a different lens that we could take to that type of decision that would benefit everyone.
What is thoughtful branding?
Thoughtful branding is, in my view, something that enhances the emotional experience of a product and doesn't take away from it. So nobody wants to be walking around as a billboard for any brand, even their employer, probably. Maybe if you're having a peak moment at your employer, you want to be a billboard, but probably most of the time you don't really want to walk around advertising for your employer. So subtle branding, branding that reminds you who gave it to you, but doesn't overpower the product. I think Patagonia would agree with us that subtle branding is good and enhances a product sometimes.
I think it's part of the trend in general, right? People don't like to be sold anymore. They want to be, it's recommended, or somehow it comes more organically, as opposed to, Putting it in your face, right?
That's right. Similar to the world of influencers, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing what happens with Brilliant and where you're going to be taking it. And I hope to catch up with you sometime again later on and hear some more stories from you.
I would love that. Thanks a lot for having me on, Darshan.
Thank you very much.
Getting to AHA was brought to you by iResearch. To find out more about us, head to iResearch.com and make sure to search for Getting to AHA in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. And don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you for listening.